are alive and well in many ways. And that's not going away.
This is the North American Service broadcasting on 17.70, 15.42, 12.05.
Now you will worship her together.
What have you done to its eyes?
You'll be the person eaten by the other voice.
The next time you're frightened in the dark, don't scream.
They are not what they claim to be. You're listening to Radio.
It's November. It's November.
Still.
It's November.
Again.
It's November.
Right now.
It's November.
Still.
It's November.
Forever.
It's
Happy
second
week.
week of Indigenous History Month.
Good unison.
You want to
So
keep going?
seamless. Yeah.
This
I can't. This is Radio Grave. I'm here with
Dom and
Amber. And I'm here with Amber. Damn.
This is bad. Well,
We can be our own people now.
yeah. I'm sitting across from Dom and she's wearing a fucking like burglar ski mask.
They don't need to know that. It's my focus mask.
It's your focus
Keeps me
mask.
focused. Seroquel got me sleepy.
Are you sleeping right now?
No, I only started feeling awake at like 11, so I drove here a little bit sleepy.
I love that. Sounds dangerous.
So I got my focus mask.
Be aggressive. Be aggressive.
On the road.
Be aggressive.
On the mountain.
Be aggressive.
On the podcast.
Literally.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming back for part 2 of The Legend of Sasquatch.
You just couldn't get enough, could you?
Couldn't get enough. Yes.
Oh, those legs. Those big muscular legs.
So muscular. Hair flipping and flopping in the wind.
He's just like me for real, but
Orange
better.
eyes 12 inches apart.
God.
But no, so last week we talked about hairy man and the Yo-Cut creation story, which was amazing. I freaking loved it. I loved researching that, talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And this week we are talking about something a little bit different, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more violent,
Love that.
a little bit more scary.
Love
Not
that.
spooky, but kind of
Scary.
Kind of scary.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Where did we end geographically? We left off in the Sierra Mountains, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were departing like the Yosemite Ahwahnee Canyon or Valley, excuse me. And we were going to be traveling east, right? Into Nevada and Oregon. And like, I'm well aware that the Sierra Nevadas have like a ton of Sasquatch shit going on there. It's actually like a total hotspot.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It is a total hotspot. It is way too much to cover. If I covered that, it would be an entire episode of its own. That leaves it, oh, are you taking off your ski mask?
My focus mask.
I literally, you are sweating.
So warm.
You're so,
No, I'm not.
your eyebrows are gone. Oh no. You want to see? Here, let me open my camera.
Are they really gone?
They're literally gone, bro.
I just wiped some. They're not gone. They're a little bit gone. That's what I get. Oh my God.
I like you with no eyebrows though.
I'll fix it later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Fix it in post.
Fix it.
in post. It's fine.
I think
Now I'm better.
I love you.
I love you too. I love Sasquatch.
I love Sasquatch too. Okay, so yeah, if we did an episode in the Sierras, it would be an entire like episode of its own, which we might do in the future. We might cover the Sierra camp tapes, which is more Sasquatch stuff, but it is not from necessarily an indigenous point of view. But it does have some really, really cool audio, but not this time.
This time is good though.
This time is good. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the Lovelock Cave Giants, accompanied by a segment on the Dark Watchers of the Cascades. B, warlike, be a cannibal. B,
Hell yeah.
warlike, be a cannibal. B, barbaric, be red-haired.
Hell yeah.
Oh, God.
All red hairs are barbaric. This I know.
This, yeah, Zach, my sister.
All of those.
No, my sister and Zach aren't a dick. So, okay, let's move on.
Let's begin.
Let's fucking begin. Tell me about the cave.
What do you remember from the cave?
What do you remember about the cave? Wait, before we start, do you remember watching The Descent?
Yeah, of course.
And when I was like 13 and I saw it, I thought it was fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, this is such a good scary movie. I rewatched it like a couple years ago. Huge monster tits in that.
Yeah.
All of the lady monsters that are down there in the cave
Titted up.
have fucking rockin' tits.
Yeah.
Raw, huge fucking plump knockers.
You were like, as a kid, you're like, I don't know why, but this movie's like, this is maybe the best movie I've ever
I
seen.
didn't even notice, but then I like watched it and I was like, oh, this got that early 2000s like monster tits. Like, of course, everything has to be so sexy. And it's so embarrassing to watch them rock climb. When I watched it with Zach, he was like, they're not even doing it right. That's not even how you do it.
Okay, Zach. Oh.
He would know. His dad is a like retired. I don't know if he's retired. I think he still climbs, but he's a rock.
He's still a rock.
He's still a fucking rock. He's a solid rock.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. But no, he's a ice climber.
Oh, sick. That's cool.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's super cool. He did it for years. I think he still does it. Anyway,
This is not the Descent cave. There's no.
No.
I mean, there might be tits, but not the same tits from the Descent.
Actually, there's no tits in this that I'm aware of.
I'll put some in.
Okay, cool.
I'll figure out where they can go.
Show me your tits.
I'll show you where they will appear.
I've never seen Dom's boobs or her feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
You see my feet, but yeah. Okay. So we're going to the cave. Not the Descent cave, but the cave.
Yeah.
The Lovelock cave.
The Lovelock cave.
So, in 1911, novice archaeologist anthropologist Llewellyn L. Loud,
La la la.
initials Llewellyn L. Loud was tasked to oversee an excavation site in northwest Nevada. This task was ordered by Loud's superior, anthropologist A.L. Crowbar from Sasquatch Part 1.
Fucking L.R. Krober. A.L. Krober.
A.L. Fucker.
The fucking like racist ass fucking bitch ass
Artifact
fucking
stealing
pussy
ass
ass
bitch.
fucking honky ass cracker.
Can't even ball. Fucking
Can't even
bitch.
can't even ball, fucking can't even bitch, can't even like he can't even have
Gets
strong
no
legs,
hose.
no hose,
The
fucking
weakest
old,
legs.
fucking old, short,
Basically the picture of race inferiority.
short,
You
old,
white bitch.
no hair all over your body, white.
The opposite of physical supremacy, Sasquatch.
Itty bitty, tiny genetic pool.
Tiny, oh, I thought you were going to say tiny eyes close together.
Tiny
Hell yeah,
eyes.
dude.
His last name is German. Nazi. Fucking Nazi.
Fucking eugenicist
Oh, wait.
bitch.
This is in 1911.
Yeah, before the war that he started.
Against us.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay, let's move. Yeah.
the site of the excavation was at a cave southeast of Humboldt Lake. Allegedly, miners had discovered native artifacts within this cave from a guano heap. After cleaning the cave of resources, the excavation began. For 5 months, Loud and his team dug 41 lots outside and within Lovelock Cave. They found over 10,000 fragments and materials within. However, like stated before, Loud was a novice in his field.
I think novice is like a very generous term.
Amateur, then.
Like not an archaeologist.
Yeah. Just the year before, 1910, Loud was still a full-time janitor and security guard at the University of California. He was a non-degree student studying field archaeology. He's not a professional.
He's like the guy who like watches like a survival show and then goes out into the woods and like tries to be a survivalist. and fails. He's like the guy who watches The Bear on Hulu
And says he's a chef.
and then is like, I'm going to be a chef.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah, that's kind of LLL.
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 LLL stands for loser.
Loser, loser, loser.
So because of this, his methods and practices were definitely green. Green, putting it very politely. They were bullshit, not there. Loud did not keep a comprehensive report of the excavation. His records were vague and without footnotes, making them kind of useless. His dig locations were labeled improperly and inaccurately. He never established any kind of grid system for the dig, made his map totally useless. Overall, Loud's efforts were inconsistent at best, detrimental at most, I'd say.
Literally.
It would take over a decade for archaeologists to return for a second dig at Lovelock Cave.
Imagine him coming back and being like, I have pulled 10,000 fragments and materials of indigenous artifacts from this cave and doesn't have any fucking notes.
He's like, yeah, I just found that.
Like, that's insane.
That's literally, yeah, it's like he went in and just kind of like dug a lot and then found stuff and then put it in a bucket.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, I got it.
Yeah.
I'm an archaeologist now.
The first time it was fucked up.
The second excavation was in 1924. And for this excavation, Loud was assigned to oversee the dig. He was accompanied by other archaeologists, as well as a member of local Paiute natives. Llewellyn Loud also took the opportunity to connect and research with the Northern Paiute, documented their unique legends, oral traditions, stories of creationism, language, etc. For 2 years, from 1924 to 1926, the cave was excavated, and the artifacts discovered would exceed the expectations of everyone involved. A cache was discovered which held hunting supplies, 2 bundles of animal traps, 11 Thule duck decoys, 8 intricately designed with feathers and paint, and 3 unfinished, and then feathers for the duck decoys. And it wouldn't be until the 1980s that an accurate date or age could be produced on these decoys. The samples indicated that the duck decoys were dated between 330 BC to 130 BC. A donut-shaped stone was also found, with 365 notches carved along the outside and 52 corresponding notches inside. Some scientists believe this is a calendar. Not only were ancient items found within Lovelock, but also totally intact mummified human remains. Allegedly, these remains were peculiar because they were very big. The mummies were all said to have been well over 6 feet tall. The smallest was a woman who was 6.5 feet tall, and the largest was a man who was 8.5 feet tall. Fucking gigantic,
Yeah.
literally. Along with the giant mummies was a sandal measured over 15 inches, as well as a handprint on the wall being over twice the size as a white man's hand. When Loud went to the local Paiute to tell them of the discovery of mummies in the cave, he was informed of a series of historical Paiute events of great significance.
The Northern Paiute would tell Loud of a great Paiute victory, which occurred several generations before them. And Loud would attempt to record their stories. And of course, the issue of ethno-arrogance ensued, challenging the words of the locals. So according to Loud and his colleagues, it was their job to determine if this victory was factual or just another Indian legend, quote unquote. And so in the writings of Loud regarding the Lovelock Cave remains, he'd be first to publish about the Saydu Ka. So according to Loud, the Saydu Ka were a band of people who lived near the Humboldt River in Nevada. They were a warlike group of people, and they were eventually eradicated by surrounding Paiute tribes. And the remains in the cave were those of the eradicated Saydu Ka. So that's what Loud said.
Okay.
And no surprise, it appears that he was not entirely thorough in his record keeping of this research as well, because this version was Loud's oversimplification of a complicated and strange, quote, legend told by the Northern Paiute.
Legend according to white people.
So let's begin with the simplest detail that Loud got wrong, which was the tribe's name, Saydu Ka. It's just not entirely correct. And Loud was allegedly told that this group of people was named Seduka by a Paiute man, but it's very likely that Loud misunderstood the man completely, because in Paiute culture, different bands are named after what they ate. So according to Loud, Seduka translates to tule eaters, but that's incorrect. And eventually, Seduka was replaced with another name, which is Siteka. And Siteka is not an accurate name when referring to this tribe either. And the name Siteka has a different meaning altogether. And we'll talk about the Siteka later. The Northern Paiute had a different name for this eradicated tribe, a name that is hundreds of years old. And that name is Numutukata, which means people eaters.
Numutukata was a word first documented by Sarah Winnemucca in her book Life Among the Paiute. Sarah Winnemucca was born with the name Thokme Tony, which means shellflower, in the 1840s. She was an activist for Native American civil rights throughout her life into the late 1880s. She's considered to be as historically significant as Pocahontas and Sacagawea. Unfortunately, she is less known, probably because of her activism. Here's some history about Sarah Winnemucca and why her retelling of this story has so much credibility. Sarah Winnemucca, daughter of Chieftain Winnemucca, came from a long line of chieftains of the Northern Paiute. The tribe's name was Huiwi-Tekutta, meaning fish eaters. Sarah's tribe suffered from manifest destiny. The tribe was nomadic, stifled from resources, and this caused starvation. Her mother was very afraid of white people, and this made Sarah afraid too. Her grandpa, Chief Truckee, traveled to California with a few settlers. Allegedly, he returned with an admiration for the whites. Chief Truckee said the whites were friendly and believed a modern way of life could benefit them. On Chief Truckee's second trip to California, Sarah and her mother came along. Sarah fell ill from poison oak. She was treated by a white nurse, and Sarah became more comfortable with white people after this. When she was 15, she boarded with a wealthy white family to assimilate, quote unquote. She changed her name to Sarah Winnemucca and attended school. She learned how to speak English, as well as Spanish and 2 other indigenous languages. She also learned how to read and write in English, but she still faced racism daily, obviously. Upon her return home, her tribe had been devastated by disease and violent settlers. A railroad had displaced her tribe and land treaties were broken over and over. She had received white education, had high status as daughter of chieftains, and was unafraid of whites. Because of this, she was able to become a tenacious activist for her people with a loud voice. She became a translator and spoke on the behalf of other Paiute tribes, specifically at the Malheur Reservation in Oregon. But she established treaties with governors. She brought awareness to the Shoshone-Bannock War, which was the result of settlers. She traveled as far as D.C. to speak on the behalf of the entire country's indigenous population. She died in her 40s, but in her short life she rose to be a highly respected and successful woman. Her titles were activist, humanitarian, educator, interpreter, translator, scout, guide, and author. Her dream was to see her people thrive alongside the whites, able to coexist as well as assimilate without losing their indigenous identity, to remain powerful and respected just like her. If you enjoy our podcast, please rate, review, and consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/radiograve. Your patronage and support helps us continue to make content for you. You can stay up to date with us by following our Instagram account at Radio Grave Podcast, and be sure to tell all your spooky friends about us too. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
The following story is cited from Sarah Winnemucca's book, Life Among the Paiute, and here she shares the oral history of her people's long-lasting war with the Numutukata. So, hundreds of years ago, several generations before Sarah's grandfather was alive, this is estimated about 1500 AD, the Northern Paiute lived in fear of a barbarian tribe, the Numutukata. They were described to be large, but not necessarily giants.
So just big. They're just big.
Yeah. They had red hair and bodies that were hairier than a native's. It was also said that they had lighter colored skin. So these people, the Numitakutta, were violent and merciless, ambushing other natives with intent to kill. And like the Paiute, they were skilled trappers, and they liked using spiked pit traps, and they would place the pit traps along paths frequently traveled. Could you imagine falling in a pit trap full of spikes?
I don't want to.
No, I don't want to either. Also, how do you even set up a pit trap full of spikes?
You would dig the pit and then put the spikes in the ground and then probably fill it with like leaves or like something they could fall into or like grass or something.
Yeah.
Like not necessarily ground because they have to fall into it.
Right.
Or you could put like big leaves or something over it.
I'm thinking like, how would you get the spikes in there?
You'd be down in there and probably it has like a thinner end that you into the ground.
You look so ridiculously emo right now. Dom took off her ski mask.
But it took my eyebrows
Off as
with
well.
it. Yeah.
And now she's just wearing her hair over her eyes.
Because I don't have eyebrows.
Why do you think I'm not judging you.
I'm not saying you judge me. I just don't like not having eyebrows.
I think
so
you
I
look
put my hair
slay.
over it. Well, that's nice of you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of
But
course.
I just I put my hair over.
Okay. Well, I hope you don't fall into a pit trap.
I think I would recognize a pit trap, regardless of my eyebrows.
You can't see.
I can see. How am
You
I
can't
reading?
see through your hair. You're not reading. I'm reading.
I'm looking you dead in the eye.
I
right
can't
now.
even see it. Okay, I'm going to move on from this. So, all of this senseless killing wasn't for nothing. Obviously, they were eating the Paiute. They're called Numitakutta. They're people eaters. They're eating the Paiute. They're
Gotcha.
trapping them. And it said that if they couldn't get any Paiute, they'd dig up their own dead.
Oh, so they're like, well, we can't get anybody, so we got people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this resulted in full-scale wars between the Northern Paiute and the barbarians, and it was totally fierce. The barbarians were fewer in numbers, but were difficult to defeat. They fought without fear and displayed amazing feats of strength and agility. Sarah talks of them jumping into the air and catching arrows, using them on the Paiute, throwing them back in return.
That's wild.
That's fucking crazy, right? However, there were times of peace between the Northern Paiute and the Numitakutta. This was to live in harmony, so they'd intermarry, and this was an attempt to help them and civilize some of them to not eat people anymore. They're like, hey.
You can eat other things
Yeah.
and not have to kill people for it.
Yeah. They're like, look, we can be neighbors. You can marry my daughter even.
And not eat me.
And they were like, no. So, yeah, the barbarians had a hard time integrating to the Paiutes' way of life. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, these periods of peace never really lasted very long because they were cannibals for life. And the war continued. And eventually, the Paiute finally decided to wage a war of extermination against the barbarians. They were just sick of being like, stop killing us. We're going to retaliate. Now they're like, we're going to genocide you. We're over you. There's more of us than there are of you. Like, we're done. And after 3 years of very determined and fierce fighting, the Paiute were winning. And the barbarians' small numbers were driven west to Humboldt Lake. And they were forced to flee into the lake in rafts with no food or shelter. And some of them drowned, and some made it to shore, and they were killed, and some escaped. And the survivors ran less than 5 miles southeast to a natural rock shelter, which is called Lovelock Cave today. It was at Lovelock Cave where the remaining Numitakutta were trapped by the Paiute, and for several days, the barbarians were starved of water. Every time an escape was attempted, the barbarians were shot down with arrows. And the Paiute told them if they wanted to live, they had to give up cannibalism.
That's fair.
Yeah. And the Numitakutta just refused to surrender and assimilate. They said, we'd rather die than not be cannibals.
Okay.
And the Paiute decided it was just time to end it once and for all. So the Paiute piled stacks upon stacks of sagebrush in front of the cave and inside the mouth of the cave, and they lit it on fire. And they believed that the smoke and heat would drive the barbarians out, but the Numatakutta never emerged. And they basically all suffered the deaths of hot asphyxiation. And Paiute warriors stood and watched out for survivors, and none of them ever emerged. So they were like, cool, they're gone. And according to Sarah Winnemucca, this was the end of the Numatakutta. They were exterminated. So today, the remaining local tribe of the Lovelock Cave area share the same legend told by Sarah Winnemucca. And this tribe is the Kuptakutta, which are the ground squirrel eaters. And their people waged a war against a tribe of cannibals who were giants with red hair, just like the Northern Paiute, the Huihuitakutta. And they also called these barbarians the Numatakutta. And the only difference in their legend is that these giants had red hair all over their bodies, kind of like Sasquatch. They were hairier. Did the Numatakutta actually exist? Were they actually giants? Were they actually cannibals? Were they something other? Were they Sasquatch, Bigfoot, hairy man kind of vibes? So we have to go way back in time to understand any of this.
So first of all, it was determined that Lovelock Cave is absolutely prehistoric. According to actual reports regarding the human remains, around 60 average height mummies were unearthed, quote unquote average height. Kind of vague, but reports span between 5'6" and 5'10", average. Allegedly, some were even taller. These taller mummies were around 6 foot, some over by a few inches.
So remember, like the initial reports, or what is believed to be the initial reports, said that the smallest was 6'5", and the tallest was 8.5.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Correct.
It's an over-exaggeration.
Radiocarbon dating conducted on the remains decades later showed a human femur dating to 1450 BC, human muscle tissue dating 1420 BC, and this meant that the Lovelock mummies were much older than expected. It was concluded human occupation of Lovelock Cave began around 1500 BC. Occupation lasted some 3,000 years, dubbed the Lovelock culture. The Lovelock culture began at the tail end of the Great Basin Archaic culture. Despite the terminology archaic, it does not imply backwards, it implies dynamic adaptation. The Great Basin Archaic culture was the most technologically persistent in the New World. They were preoccupied with survival, thus having a drive to thrive. The West American desert was an area that was inhospitable to humans. Yet the Great Basin people successfully occupied the huge territory for thousands of years. They were seasonal wanderers, the first documented at the time, and they had opportunistic diets. As the climate changed, Great Basin people began to settle around the new marshes, rivers, and lakes, beginning the new era of the Lovelock culture. After 3,000 years, the Lovelock culture was replaced by the West Numic migration from the Great Plains. The West Numic migration into the Great Basin is believed to have occurred around 1000 AD. At the time, the average height of the Numic and Plains people was between 5'8" and 5'10", making them the tallest people in the world in 1000 AD.
Right. I just want to say that second tallest in the world was Australian Aboriginal people.
Oh, okay, yeah.
At 1000 AD.
Considering the average height of the mummies of the Lovelock culture, they were basically around the same height as the West Numic people. Some of the mummies were taller by several inches. Eventually, the West Numic divided, establishing their own tribes and territories, and the Northern Paiute came to exist, and their ancestors were tall as fuck. When it comes to Sarah Winnemucca's retelling of the Numatakutta, her writings of the Northern Paiute in conflict with the barbarian tribe for centuries is probably true. Historically, Sarah's retelling of the Northern Paiute conquering the Numatakutta is basically the same, give or take a few details. We should clarify. The Lovelock cave mummies are obviously not the Numatakutta. The remains were dated to be from 1450 BC, way before the Numatakutta. It is believed that Lovelock Cave could have actually been a burial site. Over time, parts of the cave collapsed, burying the remains. Generations passed and the burial site was forgotten, and the cave began to be used for other things, storing food, congregating, shelter, so on.
Yeah, like traps, decoys,
Right. Yeah. Everything
sandals.
that they actually found.
Right.
15-inch sandals,
Huge sandals.
deluxe sandals. There's actually a sled
Oh my
for
boy.
children to play in. Yeah.
Oh my boy.
No. However, Sarah Winnemucca never claimed that these remains in Lovelock Cave were the Numatakutta. She had died over 40 years before the mummy's discovery. But it's still believed that Lovelock Cave was the final site of the Numatakutta genocide. The story is, the Paiute removed the Numatakutta bodies from the cave. They transferred them to a different site in order to cremate them, destroying them forever. So we have to ask ourselves, were the Great Basin people, Numatakutta, really barbarians? To the Paiute, it's very likely they were. The Great Basin people were considered to be similar to the land itself. Unforgiving, uninviting, savage, brutal, harsh. They were big, hairy, powerful. They were something the Paiute had never seen before. Most of all, they had a different way of life and were not willing to assimilate. Were they really cannibals? This is not certain. It's not uncommon for societies to dehumanize other groups during persistent wartime. It's easier to justify genocide if your enemy is deserving of eradication. Cannibalism is a good excuse, especially if they also eat their own dead. It's like wrong to anyone, basically.
Right. And also, like we said before, the Great Basin people were opportunist. They had opportunistic diets. So if there were times of starvation, times of famine, people like that will happen. That is just a true ass fact. And
Ass fact.
it's an ass fact. And also we see this in the Sawney Bean clan, which I don't know if you've ever heard of the Sawney Bean clan, but that was during the war when the English were trying to take Scotland. And the English would tell stories about an inbred Scottish family called the Sawney Bean clan who lived in a cave who were giant cannibals who were eating Englishmen. They didn't exist. They were just saying that shit.
So they could
have
some war.
So they could have some war and take Scotland. And
So
Scottish,
reminds me of 9/11.
whoa, okay. And also, like, you know, I think that historically Scottish people were considered to be proud and rugged and kind of the same as Great Basin people. They were a little bit harsh, not necessarily aggressive or warlike.
Just tough.
They were fucking tough. So, you know, there are lots of things that are fucking true. So we have to talk about the fact that these ancient mummies, some of them were over 6 feet tall at a time where the West Numic people were there trying to take their land and trying to live in this area, and they were smaller than them pretty much. So we have to separate the truth from the lies. How did the Lovelock Cave mummies go from being 6 feet tall to 8 feet tall?
Magic.
And like, just to keep it brief and simple, the exaggerated rumors of the red-haired Lovelock giants were like 100% like everyone assumes to be the result of the rise in popularity of traveling oddity sideshows. Also, this is an era of Indigenous people just being sideshows in general. All their fucking artifacts, their remains, everything.
Yeah.
And throughout the mid 1800s and into the 20th century, giants were like a big thing in North America.
Like hoax giants.
Yes. And mummies were randomly being discovered all over the place, and they were on display for like a penny a view. And they were like made out of gelatin and leather, and some were carved from gypsum. And they were always advertised as real, like mummified Native American giants who roamed the Americas before the white man. It was just incredibly profitable because people love oddities. It's just, oh my God, come see this wonder. If it's 1920, and everybody's like 5'8", and then you find these mummies in a cave, and some of them are 6'2" or 6'3", you're like, holy fuck.
I found some 19-foot mummies in my yard, you guys.
Literally. So, meanwhile, the remaining populations of Indigenous people across North America, you know, were fighting to protect and save their culture and their language and their lands and their lineage and ultimately their lives. And alongside their struggle, The traveling sideshow giants portrayed Native Americans as having a freakish and inhuman lineage, grounded in nothing but like systematically racist legends. So all the while, whites were making a pretty penny from this. The Lovelock mummies were and still are a very significant and fascinating archaeological discovery, which has unfortunately been overshadowed and labeled as a hoax. Those mummies are not a hoax. They're real. They are from 1450 BC. And I didn't really include this, but there were a lot of early anthropologists and ethnologists who initially came to the Americas, who spent a lot of time with Indigenous people, like in the 1700s, 1800s. And the one thing that they always said was like, oh my God, they're so hot. Like, you know, all of these anthropologists who are actually interested. There was one in particular, I don't remember. But he was kind of like the grandfather of trying to figure out if certain races were superior to others. And he was straight up like, Indigenous people are like
number one.
Literally.
Yeah.
He's like, they're handsome. They're like crazy athletic. They're like X, Y, and Z. He pretty much said that about everyone who wasn't European. He also appreciated them in ways that were more than just physical, not just, oh, they're so tall and hot and athletic, but it was also in other ways where it's like
Socially, culturally.
Yeah. And, you know, I do want to just say like, I think that there is a very common belief that Indigenous people are not intelligent people, that they're stoic, and that they're not charismatic, and they're not able-bodied, and that they're short and unattractive. And that's not true. Mm-hmm. It's actually the farthest thing from the truth. Like, no one group of people is just
One thing.
Also, I think that people think that there are other positive attributes that are not true either. Oh, Native American people are so good at war. They're so good at being good warriors. And that's also kind of negative. It is negative, you know? And it's just like,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, it's also like, okay, thanks.
What a backhanded ass compliment.
Well, and it's like, it also is in relation to savagery.
Yeah.
And violence. And it's like, Crazy Horse was an amazing warrior. And he was an amazing warrior because he was fighting for his life and the lives of his tribe and his people and his wife. And like,
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be a good warrior?
That people are like, oh, they're so good at fighting and killing. It's like, yeah, when you have to be.
Of course. When you look at it from a bigger perspective, the leftover memory is history that's interpreted as campfire stories. And it's just a hoax to people. And it's not. Even when I started this reading about this, I was like, is it real? Like, I know the mummies were real, but is it real? And you look at Sarah Winnemucca's story, it lines up. She says, yeah, my people were in the midst of a war for hundreds of years. And the West Numic people came over in 1000 AD. And her story takes place around 1500. That's hundreds of years of war. That's hundreds of years of eradication. So it's accurate, which goes to prove oral tradition isn't fucking campfire stories. It's accurate because it's not written down on paper, European style. Like, it's not real, and that's just not true. So it's important to recognize the reclamation of taking back what belonged to them first. They should just be recognized as being the strongest people that have ever existed on this continent. Like,
And that this shit is theirs.
And also that they don't need white people to pity them.
Pity just keeps a people as a novelty.
And it also keeps them oppressed.
That's right.
There needs to be a different mindset when it comes to respecting Indigenous people and like viewing them in all the ways that they are, which is artistic, beautiful, unique, intelligent, powerful people. Just like Sarah Winnemucca.
Amen, brother.
I hope that people can recognize the reclamation of the story of the Northern Paiute, the Numitakata, and the Lovelock mummies, and realized that they're not fake. They're not 8 feet tall. They were tall, though, because they were genetically superior.
Can I get a land back?
Can I get a land back? Land
motherfucker.
back. Land back. So let's go back to the beginning of this episode, because you might be wondering, oh, how is any of this related to Sasquatch? Because it's kind of not, except for the fact that people put Sasquatch upon the Numitakata. And that is because of the original name that was bestowed upon them, which is the Sedu-Ka, which turned into Site-Ka. When you look up the Lovelock Giants, the first thing that comes up is the legend of Site-Ka, hairy, giant, Sasquatch monster. Not so much the story of the Numitakata. And in reality, Site-Ka is the name of something totally different, because Site-Ka really means keepers of the forest to the Yahuskan Paiute. And the Yahuskan Paiute are located in and around Southern Oregon. And it's the name that they have for their friend Sasquatch.
Dude.
Yeah.
Friend to all.
Yeah. And so now we're just going to head west into Oregon, where we're going to talk about the Site-Ka, who are keepers of the forest and the Dark Watchers. I'm going to let you take it away. I've been talking too much anyway.
It's a podcast. You can't talk too much. So, our first story. It comes from a Karuk man named Tom. At the time, he was only 19 years old. It goes like this. It was August of 1982, around 6 p.m. I was alone, walking south down Highway 96 from the Somez Bar store, heading to my cousin's house about a mile away. The highway is surrounded by lots of madrone and pine trees, manzanita and buckbrush, and it runs along the side of the Klamath River. My cousin's driveway was on the furthest side of the road from the water, just on the other side of a steep hill. I was almost to my cousin's driveway when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. When I looked across the road, I saw a figure up on the hill about 60 feet away from me. I froze up, and at first I thought it was my cousin. But then I realized it was a big, hairy, extremely tall man in the brush. He had been watching me.
Dark Watcher.
He was watching darkly.
Dark. I mean, I guess it's daytime? Around 6 p.m.
6 p.m., so maybe.
It was in August,
so
though.
it would be daytime, yeah.
Yeah.
The man was only visible from his mid-chest to head, and his hair was a dark brown. His face was hairless. He had the face of a man. His features were pronounced and human. This is why I thought it was maybe my cousin. The man had a bony face, and the eyes were set deep and dark, just like my cousin's face. I guess he kind of looked like the Bigfoot from Harry and the Hendersons, but was more human than anything else. We stared at each other for a long time. It felt like many minutes, but was probably only 20 seconds or so. I felt that he was not menacing, and once I realized he wasn't going to harm me, I looked away. I looked around the bend to see how close I was to my cousin's driveway for only a few seconds, and when I looked back, he was gone. All I could see and hear was the brush rustling. I made it to my cousin's house and told no one. The next day, I went back to where I saw the creature in search of tracks. The brush where he had been was around 6 feet tall, so he must have stood around 8 feet or more. And in the rocky dirt, there was a couple impressions, but no tracks. The area all around the brush smelled terrible, like a musty, wet dog.
Stinky, 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 stinky.
You know who that is.
Evil, stinky boy.
Smell the stink.
Just stinky.
It's Bigfoot. It's Sasquatch.
Sasquatch is stinky.
I knew I saw a Bigfoot, or what we call the Motakata, which means the people who live up the mountain. And the Karuk have known about the Motakata people for a long time. When I was 12 or so, my family and me heard the howling of a Bigfoot while we were hunting in the woods, 10 or so miles north of where I saw the Bigfoot. That was around 1975. I did not tell anyone about my face-to-face encounter for a long time, and later my grandmother told me that the Motakatas followed me around when I was little, just to keep an eye on me. Some others have seen the Bigfoot as well, but some people have seen clothing on them or clothing wrapped around their upper bodies. Some of the elders have said they like tobacco and to leave it out for them as a gift.
That's interesting. The
That's pretty
clothing
cool.
thing.
Yeah, like sometimes they're wearing clothes.
I imagine like a t-shirt, but I think it's not. I think it's
No,
more
I'm thinking
like
a wrapper jacket.
yeah.
Like,
I think it's definitely more like a clothing that they probably have made, not like like not like a t-shirt.
It's not like a NASCAR t-shirt.
No, or like a windbreaker or anything like that.
Oh, that would be sick.
Scarf as a top. You ever meet a girl who wears a scarf as a top?
Yes, Mom.
Oh. Has your mom listened yet?
I hope not.
Okay, cool.
But no, I mean, it's Oregon, so imagine like Sasquatch decked out in like Patagonia head to toe.
Literally.
Patagonia
Beer.
with like Blundstocks. Blundstones?
Blundstone.
Fuck. I'm thinking Birkenstock and Blundstones. They're the same shit
Whatever.
to me.
One on one
Out
foot,
of
one
my
on the
price
other
tag.
one.
Out of my price range. Yeah, he has one Birkenstock and one Blundstone.
I always buy my Blundstones second hand or at least pre-loved because there are some bitches who buy those shits brand new and wear them twice and then sell them for like half price.
Thank you, yuppie bitches.
Thank you. They're like $100. They're like, yeah, I wore it to a wedding. I'm like, what? What wedding?
What are you talking
What
about?
wedding were you wearing these to?
It was the rural wedding.
It was a rural
It was
barnyard
rural.
wedding.
Oh
It was
my
barnyard.
God.
It was barnyard themed, sunflowers and what is it called when they paint stuff white? Rustic sunflowers.
All the bridesmaids wore camo.
Real tree.
They all wore real tree and they had AKs.
The colors are yellow and brown and navy blue.
Oh, I was thinking that it would be yellow and green. Go Ducks. Anyway, my wife also has had experiences with the creatures up in Washington. She talked about how she'd go net fishing on the river with some others from her tribe, and sometimes they'd have rocks thrown at them from the Bigfoot, so they knew to stop fishing and leave. Her tribe's descendants talked about the people who lived in the mountains.
We'll talk about that soon.
Yeah. They said the mountain people would come down from the hills and throw rocks at them while they were fishing. Her people would abandon their catches, and the mountain people would finish pulling in their nets, take the fish, and leave.
Literally.
Dude, Bigfoots love fish, though.
They fucking love fish. They really do. They don't give a fuck about venison.
I think I might be part Sasquatch. I think if you do a 23andMe, it's like
Sasquatch?
4% Sasquatch.
I'm going to do a 23andMe.
Mine's going to say 4% Sasquatch.
It's like that South Park episode. It's like, I'm 10% victim.
Oh my fucking God.
Anyways.
Story 2. This story took place west of Wolf Creek, Oregon on the Rogue River. In 1975, I lived on Coyote Creek Road with my boyfriend in Wolf Creek, Oregon. I used to spend summer days at a popular isolated swimming hole about 12 miles out a dirt road that ran between Wolf Creek and the Rogue River. We called it the Jesus Saves Swimming Hole after some graffiti sprayed on the rocks. Amen, brother.
Amen. Jesus saves swimming hole. You want to go where Jesus saves today?
Hell yeah, I do. I mean, I love Christ, I do. Yep. It was a clear, hot July day, and I was there with my boyfriend. It was around 4 p.m., and we were the only ones there. Since we were all alone, we decided to skinny dip. We weren't worried about it at all. It was almost tradition for people to skinny dip at Jesus Saves. While my boyfriend was lying in the sun next to the hole, I was...
Sunning his hole.
He's gonna charge his root chakra, dude. He's gonna tan his balls. So while my boyfriend was laying in the sun charging his asshole, I was not far away, washing my hair in Grave Creek. As I was looking up between my legs, I suddenly saw a head peeking over a fallen log about 60 feet up the hill behind me, just slightly to my left. I panicked, and my first thought assumed this was a peeping Tom sneaking up to take a peek at us. As I stood and turned quickly, the head slunk down to disappear behind the log, but I still got a good look. The head was large and round with brownish hair. When the head moved, it reminded me of an animal, not a human. The sun was at an angle, and that made the face indistinct. The hair on the back of my neck stood up along with the need to flee. Within seconds, I made it back to the hole and told my boyfriend something was stalking us and we needed to leave. When I turned to look back to the log, I clearly saw the head, shoulder, arm, and upper torso of a very tall creature, covered in brownish hair, standing upright, about 25 feet beyond the log next to a clump of scrub oak. Then it just melted into the trees. This was not a bear. We swam across the water and climbed the rocks to the trail. Together we searched the hillside across the creek, but we saw absolutely nothing. Before this, I had 3 other encounters in Wolf Creek, all of which I had only heard something and had the same sensation of panic and hair raising on the back of my neck. But this was my only visual experience. Looking back, I didn't feel threatened, only frightened by its presence. It just seemed to be watching us.
Dark Watcher.
Watching. Darkly.
Dark Watcher.
Dark Watchers watching darkly.
Darkly watching.
Years later, I was in Weimar, Oregon, less than an hour away from Wolf Creek, and in those days, many folks lived an isolated lifestyle far back in the mountains. Because it was remote, I had to hike the last mile to my house, through the snow during the winter months. This didn't bother me because I always have my dog with me. One night, around 10 p.m., I was walking home with my dog in the snow when I heard the heavy footsteps of something walking in the bushes. My dog began to bark. My first thought was that it was my neighbor. He was a pretty large man. I called out my neighbor's name, but there was no answer, and the footsteps did not stop. My dog began to growl, and he was backed up to my leg. This time I did feel threatened. I turned and ran back to my car and drove to a friend's house many miles away. The next time I saw my neighbor, I asked him if there was a recent night that he had been walking by the road late in the evening. He said no.
Dark Watcher.
Watching darkly, with dark intent.
With dark intent. They seem to just be curious.
Yeah, I think they're just observing, learning.
That's kind of what they do, I feel like.
Or maybe they're just out there and you're up in their shit and they're like, pardon me, what you doing?
Yeah.
And then they see you. Or you see them.
I think he hangs out at fucking Jesus Saves Hole and watches naked people swim.
Why not?
He could be a young Sasquatch, too.
He's a young, horny boy.
He could just be curious.
Yeah, I mean,
like a mermaid and...
yeah.
Like Mermaid and Eric from Little Mermaid. She's like just watching.
I thought you were going to say she's just like 12 or whatever.
Oh. Okay. So, story three. The following stories, multiple, took place at Wolf Point and Warm Springs Reservation over the course of 30 plus years. I have lived on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation all of my life, and me and my family have had many run-ins with Bigfoot. 3 of these happened at my father's home in an isolated place called Wolf Point. Back then, there were no other houses there. It was wide and open, with juniper trees and sagebrush. Now it is a neighborhood, and many homes have been added there. The first run-in was back in 1971, when my daughter, Diane, was about 2 years old, and we were living at my father's place. The house had a large sliding glass door that went out to the back porch. Back then, the glass doors were only one pane, and we had only a thin white sheet to cover it at night. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I woke to hear my daughter giggling in the dining room. I walked down the dark hallway and came around the corner. I was about to tell Diane that it was too late to be playing around when I saw that we had forgotten to tack the corner of the sheet back up. The sheet was only hanging by one tack, so the window was wide open, and for some reason, the back porch light was on. Then I saw what she was giggling at. On the porch, there was a small Bigfoot, maybe 4 feet tall, standing directly in front of the door. It was jumping up and down. Then, I know, it was jumping up and down, then on and off the porch over and over again. And my daughter would giggle and jump up and down too. I could only stand there and watch, but I felt so scared. I wanted to just grab my baby and run. Then it saw me and jumped off the porch and disappeared from my view. Yo, straight up, I know that this is supposed to be a cute little baby, like Sasquatch, right? This made me think of the fucking Twilight Zone gremlin on the plane wing, like when it jumps off.
Oh my God.
And
Why would you think of that?
Because
is a cute little Sasquatch.
Because I watched that shit when I was like 6 and it like has always fucked me up.
So remember the last episode, the pictograph that had the mom and the dad and the baby? Just think of that baby. That's what this is.
I'm trying to. Or
Don't think of scary baby.
I'm thinking of cute baby. Or, you know, really, I know it sounds fucked up, but really what I think of is like an Ewok with like the tiny legs and the tiny arms.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an Ewok.
Yeah.
You walk your ass back to the house, baby Bigfoot.
Baby Bigfoot, come on now.
You're going to get in trouble from your parents.
Come on now.
And then they're going to come to my house and get mad at me. So go home.
Go home. So, okay.
Ran away.
Yeah, he ran away. He jumped off the porch and disappeared from her view. And she goes on to say, that seemed to break me because I screamed, Diane! And she spun around and looked at me. Then I saw what I assumed to be the little guy's mother walk by the window.
I told you.
I lunged and grabbed my daughter's arm, picked her up, and ran back down the hall. My dad came out and asked me what was going on, and I told him. Being a very traditional Native American man, he got mad at me for allowing my daughter to, quote, play so late at night. He told me that Bigfoot have traveled and protected our people for many generations, and they meant no harm to us as long as we left them well enough alone. Then he told me to go back to bed.
He's like,
it's just a Bigfoot.
Well, why is that damn kid playing around at the window being a nuisance? Leave them Bigfoots alone.
There's a baby Bigfoot there too. They were just playing.
Leave them Bigfoots alone. They're our friends.
Okay, but get this. She says, my parents told me not long after this happened that they had also seen a small Bigfoot playing outside that same door from inside the house. But this little Bigfoot was playing with me when I was a little girl. I don't remember this myself, and I can't remember much of what my mother and father told me either.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not the same baby Bigfoot, though. I think baby Bigfoot's probably just come there to
What
play.
if it was the mom?
That would be
she
funny.
was little.
And then the mom comes up and she's like, do you remember me?
And she's like, yeah.
Wait, I want you to meet my son. Wait, come back.
This is my son. Can they play?
Please, I have errands to run. Please. Can I leave him here?
I have to go to the rock store. I don't know.
Gotta go fishing, probably.
I have to go steal some fish from some...
I have to break a deer's neck with my bare hands.
I have to go walk across the road and stare at people. I have to go watch. I have to go be a dark watcher.
I heard there's a lot of naked kids down at Jesus Saves, so I'm gonna head down there. I can't bring my son, though.
He's not allowed.
He's not allowed yet. He's too young for that.
Okay, so she says the second run-in was in 1983 when I was pregnant with my fifth child.
Wow, wow, wow. 5.
5 babies.
You think having one and it met a Bigfoot, that won't stop you from having more? You think 5 Bigfoots aren't going to come up to your patio window?
5 children. What if they get into a baby competition? You know how white ladies do that,
Yeah,
like
they keep
Mormons and
babying.
shit.
And then suddenly there's 15 little kids in the kitchen, and there's 15 Bigfoot babies outside the window, and the ground is just shaking from all the children jumping.
Literally.
That's so many popsicles to give children.
Thank God Otter Pops are like a half a cent a piece.
Yeah, because that's 30 Otter Pops
Yeah.
for an afternoon.
God. And I know they want 2.
Who does the Bigfoots or the kids?
Everybody.
That's 60 Otter Pops.
Don't they come in boxes of like
100.
200 or yeah.
I think so. But
So
literally one
It's like
afternoon.
$5. It's just syrup.
That's $5 a day.
Okay, ready? The second run-in was in 1983 when I was pregnant with my 5th child. Again, I was living out at Wolf Point at my dad's house, but he no longer lived there. After he remarried, he left his house to all of his children. This time, I didn't see the Bigfoot, but I heard him. It was around 3 a.m. on this night, and our dogs were barking up a storm, and I could hear heavy walking and the pounding and clacking of rocks and beating wood. I remember my Mexican husband, who did not believe in Bigfoot, telling me that it was only the cattle or horses that wander around the area. But then the sound intensified. Could you imagine your husband, like the crazy sounds outside, and he's like, yeah, it's a cow.
That's a cow. And it's like someone like speaking.
Yeah.
Hello, is anyone in there? Honey, it's a cow. There's like a saxophone playing. Honey.
It's a cow farm. There's gonna be cows outside.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Another woman gaslit into thinking Bigfoot's not outside your house.
Literally.
It happens every day.
Believe victims. Believe victims of Sasquatch.
Peeping.
Peep.
Sasquatch
He's a
peep.
fucking peeper.
Yeah, I mean, well, go on. I don't really know what happens.
Whatever it was, it began hitting and shaking the rain gutters outside. It was as if it was trying to intimidate the dogs with its size or something. It intimidated me. Years later, we had a pit bull that we found one morning dead with its back broken, but no open wounds. My husband didn't consider it was Bigfoot, but I knew that's what it was.
That's scary.
I mean, her dad did say as long as they was left alone, they would be fine. And a dog can sometimes be a little too doggy. This third story is a little crazy, actually. The third run-in was in 1994, and this happened to my husband and my 2 younger brothers. The 3 of them went hunting for rabbits in the hills of Wolf Point. They were all talking and not really doing a good job, quote, hunting, when my husband looked up and saw a figure standing in the distance about 100 or so feet away. It was an open range with only juniper trees. They had been on the plateau, and he assumed it was a horse standing facing them, as it appeared to only have 2 legs. That was until it turned sideways and walked away from them at an incredible speed. My husband could not describe his disbelief. Being from Mexico, he never believed in any of this stuff. Then they all started chasing it.
No.
Yeah. What stood out to my husband the most was the speed in which it walked, not ran. He was not running. He just was like,
Well, when you're big, your stride is fucking big too.
huge, literally. It went over a hill and they continued running full throttle, and they never were able to catch up to it, and it was soon out of sight. Once they cleared the hill, they arrived at the edge of a cliff that went straight down. He described them looking for a trail or a ledge that the Bigfoot must have gone down, but there was nothing. It just disappeared over the cliff. He became a believer ever since. She continues, another time, some of my other relatives were hunting too, and they also saw Bigfoot moving faster than any human ever could. They were in the open country driving down the road, and a Bigfoot just come running out from the desert after the truck. It followed, running alongside the road, and it was just looking at them. The truth is, there are lots of sightings that happen on the reservation, but there is a genuine respect for this creature, sort of like what my father told me. My mother, who has now passed away, shared a memory she had from when she was a little girl back in the early 1900s. She had been with her mother near Hehe, which I tried to look this up, how to say this, or tried to find where Hehe was, and I couldn't.
Yeah, and it's spelled Hehe, just so you guys know.
Yeah. She had been with her mother near Hehe, and they had been tanning deer hides all morning. She stopped tanning the hide and looked up on the hillside across the creek from where they were at, and there was one sitting on its haunches watching them. Dark Watcher. Dark Watcher, Dark Watcher.
Watching darkly from the dark.
Dark Watcher. She was about to tell her mother what she saw when her mother talked very quietly to her in Sahaptin. She told her to stop staring at it and get back to work. When they got back to their teepee, her mother explained that it had been watching them for some time and that it meant no harm to them. It was only waiting for them to leave so it could gather up the deer hair they had left behind. Even to this day, we know that the Bigfoot is still on the reservation. He empties out garbage cans without tipping them over, unlike bears and dogs. As Indians, we acknowledge their existence. We know they are here, but we do not like to talk about it very much. People do not believe us and call us crazy. This story took place on the Umatilla Indian Reservation just outside of Pendleton, Oregon in 1994. Quote, I grew up on the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Cayuse, just over the hill from St. Andrew's Mission. Our house was surrounded by lots of trees, a row of quaking aspen, a few evergreens, and cottonwood trees, as well as a huge willow tree right in front of the house. We had only one neighbor who lived about 1,000 feet north of us. Other than that, there was nothing but wheat fields surrounding us. So, not a whole lot of forest. By the way, I found this house. I know where this happened.
Oh my God.
It's just...
Your detectiving has gone too far.
Well, I just wanted to see because, you know, when they talk about seeing the Sami, I just want to see where they're looking. So anyways, they had a lot of trees and I know where they live. Or at least where they used to live. Our pa would not let us sleep outside in summertime. He said there were too many things we didn't know about that he couldn't trust. Us kids would always wonder what he meant, but would respectfully obey. But by 1994, I was a teenager. It was September and it was the Pendleton Roundup. I was getting home very, very late that night, probably around 3 a.m. My friend and I were sitting in the car planning for the next day. We had the engine running, but the lights were off. After several minutes of talking and laughing around, I was ready to head into the house. I remember it was so quiet when I got out of the vehicle, and there were no lights around the house. And that night, there was no moon, so it was pretty dark out there. So my friend turned his headlights on so I could see my way to the front door. As soon as the car lights came on, this huge man went sprinting across the backyard. He was humongous. Humongous. His head must have been right at the level of the corner of the house.
Oh, God.
Yeah. He ran so fast, my mind wasn't sure my eyes had seen what they thought they did. I asked my friend, "Did you see that?" He, of course, was occupied with his stereo and missed it. I said goodnight and walked back to the porch of my house. I realized our 4 dogs were not barking and were all curled up inside the porch. They were actually whimpering as I neared them, which was very unusual. I thought they would have been barking for sure. I kept playing the scene over and over in my mind. The big guy was so damn fast, like 40 yards before I could even blink. His legs didn't seem to stretch out straight like we people do. He was so big, but was slender built. His head seemed to be sitting right on his shoulders. No neck that I can remember. He had dark, short hair that covered his body.
Short hair. Interesting.
Yeah. Right? And skinny. Skinny queen.
Skinny legend.
Skinny legend.
But not a legend.
The skinny legend of Sasquatch.
Skinny reality of Sasquatch. The hot, skinny, fast, dark, sleek reality of Sasquatch.
I love him. Okay. She says, that's all I remember of that night. The next day, I looked for any possible tracks, but there was absolutely nothing there. The ground was just too dry and compact. After this, an outside light was fixed to one of the corners of the house next to our basketball hoop. It was probably 9 feet off the ground. One day, we find out that the light is broken, so it gets replaced. Then the next day, it's broken again. Over and over, the light would get broken. Eventually, that ended. There were other things that happened here, too. There were lots of times I heard someone walking around the house in the early morning hours. My family members had also heard grunts sometimes, or whispering. Oh, so creepy. I don't like that. Dark watchers.
I'm dark watching you. I'm
He's
watching you.
I don't like, you know what he might be doing?
Relieving himself?
Pissing, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he has no
Pissing
neck
hard.
too, just like the kid said. Mm-hmm. With eyes that are 12 inches apart. Fuck. Just like from the last episode. So she goes on to say, and sometimes we heard things running through the wheat fields. Once I found a 20-inch footprint in the soft dirt not far from our house. And then she goes on to tell another story. Quote, this happened when I was younger, but one night, years before, we were all playing hide and seek. A niece was up in a tree hiding. She looked over at another tree next to her and saw someone was sitting up there looking at her in the dark. Dark watcher.
Dark watcher in a tree this time.
Watcher.
He's in a tree this time.
He's in a tree. She thought it was her brother, so she remained. Her and the, quote, other person watched as everybody was running past them towards the house. Then she saw her brother run past the tree. realizing that the other person was not her brother at all. She yelled out to her brothers in fear, and she jumped out of the tree. Everyone was scared and went inside.
Tree Squatch.
Tree Squatch.
Oh.
Dark Watcher.
Sap Squatch. He's up in the sap.
That's kind of cute.
Sap Squatch.
That concludes our Dark Watcher segment.
Dark Watchers.
And it also concludes episode 2 of The Legend of Sasquatch. Amaze. So amaze.
Amazeballs.
What was your favorite story?
Jesus Saves Hole.
Really?
It's just silly.
Yeah, because of the holes and...
Yeah, just because it's called Jesus Saves Hole, and then they were naked, and then he was like, what are you doing? And she was like, oh, pervert. And he's like, wait, not me. And then he ducks down.
Not me, I'm just curious.
He's like, I was just standing here. You came here naked.
I want to be part of your world.
Part of your naked world. And then they look for him. He's like, no, leave me alone. You guys are mean.
Poor guy. I like the baby Sasquatch.
Oh, wait, I forgot. Yeah, no, I like baby Sasquatch the most.
Also, yeah, that story's crazy. Baby Sasquatch, Sasquatch running off the hill, Sasquatch killing the dog, Sasquatch running up against the truck.
Yeah. Yeah, the dog killing is like... But, I mean, I can understand it.
They do that stuff. We just haven't talked about it very much.
Yeah.
They do.
I like baby Sasquatch, though.
Yeah, baby Sasquatch was so slay.
Baby Sasquatch playing with baby human. Very fun, very peace.
Very peace. Very, very peace. Yes. Amaze. We hope that you guys enjoyed that. I hope it wasn't too dry. Dry like the desert, like the high desert of the Nevada, of the Orga.
That's where I'm from. Orga high desert. It's so dry.
My favorite part of this was the Dark Watchers segment. I love telling these stories. This was like my favorite part of doing this series too, is like reading all of these stories. So good. Anyways, we'll let you guys go. We know you're probably like trying to like do other stuff. We'll get off the horn.
Like trying to bust a nut.
This is not a thing to listen to if you're trying to bust a nut.
Yeah, this show is not really.
I don't think this show is very bust a nuttable.
Unless you like big hot Sasquatches.
Which like it's not even bust a nuttable.
They don't have to be doing anything sexual.
Sexual. We talk a lot about sexual Sasquatch. We're going to talk about it in the next couple episodes. It's not going to be funny.
Yeah.
But it's okay. You know, let's just get it all out of our system right now. Because we joke about everything being sexual. But, yeah. Anyway, not to get serious. But next week, Sasquatch Part 3, we're going up into the Pacific Northwest. The origins of Sasquatch, at least the name of Sasquatch.
Be there or face the hair.
Be there
man.
Or face the hairy man. It gets deep at the end of this month, okay? It's Indigenous Heritage Month.
Yes, sir.
Second week, going into the third week. Fuck Thanksgiving. Fuck Christopher Columbus.
I love Sasquatch. Land back.
Land back. Land back.
Land back.
Land back. Land back.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you next week for part 3 of The Legend of Sasquatch. Take it easy. I hope you see a Sasquatch.
And it jumps outside the window with you and you can jump together.
Literally.
Hell yeah.
Anyways, catch you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere. It is speculated that these objects are of extraterrestrial origin. The broadcast will quiet at this time for your safety. Continue to carry out the following instructions.
Radio Grave Podcast is hosted by Amber Byland and Dominique Makasuya. Music courtesy of AOA Music, Carl Casey at Whitebat Audio, and intro music by Simon Big Byland. Audio mixing and editing by Amber Byland, logo and original art by Dominique Makasuya. Special thanks to Selma and Obi Henneke, Austin Smith, and all our supporters on Patreon. All other media and sound clips used are protected under fair use and are for the purpose of criticism, commentary, news reporting, education, and research. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.